want to ask why, after nearly 1 year into a 2-year pilot programme entitled Counselling in Primary Schools, no counsellor is available to schools in the North Leitrim area, even though Leitrim is one of the counties in the pilot area. Now, I've sent you details of one of the schools. Obviously, I don't want the name of the school to be mentioned because of confidentiality, but it is one of a number of schools in North Leitrim that have not been able to access this highly valuable and badly needed scheme.
Deputy, in June of 23, and you're correct, I was pleased to launch a €5 million pilot of counselling and wellbeing supports in primary schools in selected counties. This further supports the range of mental health and wellbeing supports already provided by the Department and the excellent work already happening in schools in relation to wellbeing. All of this supplements the mental health supports which are offered by the HSE throughout the country. The pilot has 2 strands. Strand 1 sees direct counselling supports being provided to primary schools for the first time. The Department has set up county panels of pre-approved private counsellors providing one-to-one counselling in primary schools in counties Cavan, Laois, Leitrim, Longford, Mayo, Monaghan and Tipperary. In total, 733 blocks of counselling have been allocated to schools across the pilot counties, which provides an allocation to 733 children in these counties. To date, 33 counsellors have been recruited across the 7 pilot counties. Strand 2 involves the introduction of education wellbeing teams to provide enhanced in-school supports for a cluster of primary schools in Cork, Carlow, Dublin and Dublin 16. 15 education wellbeing practitioners have been recruited to the 4 cluster areas. They have undergone an intensive training programme provided by NEPS and have commenced visiting and supporting schools in recent weeks. The supports being offered are to pupils, parents and school staff to support wellbeing and resilience at a whole school level. Separately, to supplement support for the post-primary sector, I recently announced a tender to procure services to further support wellbeing and provide mental health in post-primary schools. And the tender will invite suitable providers to work with the Department to develop and deliver additional supports to complement existing systems and structures in post-primary schools for wellbeing and mental health. As you know, the provision of counselling to children is a serious and sensitive matter, as there is no single recognised counselling qualification and no national regulatory body for counselling in Ireland. At this point in time, we're accepting applications from counsellors accredited with 6 accrediting bodies for counsellors in Ireland who meet the requisite criteria for this pilot project. This is to ensure that the counsellors have the appropriate training and skills to engage ethically, professionally and effectively with this vulnerable age group. Counsellors are available to work in all 7 counties of the pilot, and the Department continue to accept applications from counsellors on an ongoing basis. We're hoping that more counsellors will be added to the panel in the coming weeks. 2 counsellors were available to work in Leitrim, and I am delighted. Oh yeah, sorry. And I'll finish. Yeah.
Thank you, Minister. As you said yourself, this scheme came into being last May 2023. That's almost a year ago. And Leitrim is one of the 6 counties, Cavan, Laois, Leitrim, Longford, Tipperary, Mayo and Monaghan, 7 counties in this scheme. This is a very valuable scheme. It provides counselling outside of the NEPS scheme. You don't need a full assessment from teachers, etc., in order to get access to the scheme. It's a much more agile scheme, and teachers have to make a judgment through their interaction with the students, and it really is very beneficial. But it's no good if it's not available to those students. Minister, there's nobody on that panel as of now, today, that will travel to North Leitrim to provide the service as announced. And I know of 4 schools that are looking for that service. Minister, there's a lot of advertising of this service, social media, all of that, and yet when schools go looking for it, it's not there. Parents are contacting schools asking what's happening, and I'm hoping I can get some kind of positive response from you this evening.
Thanks very much. I can confirm in actual fact that 733 blocks of counselling have been allocated, benefiting 733 children. What I can say though is that it has been difficult, I will say, in certain areas to recruit, but as I said, 2 counsellors were available to work in Leitrim, and I am pleased to say that on the 11th of April an additional counsellor has been added to the panel now, who is available to work in County Leitrim. The Department is actively actively recruiting counsellors to work on this pilot, and I would encourage all counsellors who are accredited by the accredited bodies to make themselves available for this important work. This is the first in the area of primary school. There is, as you have said, an absolute need for it. It is working, and it is working very successfully in areas where there are two types of pilots, as I've said. One where you have the one-to-one counselling. It has been easier in some areas to access the counsellors than in others, but I am pleased to say that we now have the third counsellor in place for Leitrim, and indeed the 15 wellbeing practitioners that are working under the guidance of NEPS. Thank you.
The school that I gave you details of that we're not mentioning here contacted you in February, and again in March they submitted what's called, I think, the Appendix 1 form. They haven't heard back from you. It would be very useful if your department could contact them to let them know what the situation is. Because, Minister, as you know, if a principal thinks that a child needs this service, it's quite a difficult conversation to have with a parent, and then if they apply for the service and there's nothing there. So you told me there is another counsellor available, I think you said from the 11th of April, to work in Leitrim. I do know that when a counsellor was contacted, they said they could not travel the distance, that it was approximately 60 kilometres. So I hope that won't be the case in this circumstance, that whoever this counsellor is will be able to travel to the various schools in North Leitrim that need this service, because it's not the schools that need it, it's the children. And as you said yourself, it is a good service, but it needs to be accessible for students in North Leitrim.
Thanks very much, Deputy. And again, I reiterate that 733 blocks of counselling have been provided to 733 children. It is new and it is innovative. It will take time for it to take root. There have been challenges, and I would be the first to say it, in terms of recruiting counsellors. Specifically, you've referenced your own area there. But I am pleased, as I said, from just mid-April there, we have had now been fortunate to allocate a third counsellor, and we will continue to recruit in that space. It's interesting that there are two pilots, because we're saying it will give us greater learning going forward as to which is a combination of the two, or one or other being the most appropriate to move forward with. Specifically in relation to those who are training under the NEPS psychologists, it's, they can come from a variety of backgrounds, whether it's education or social care or psychotherapy. Some within that field, they are currently being trained under the NEPS psychologists, and they are actually out working in the clusters as well. So there will be greater progress going forward. But again, I would encourage people who are working in this field and have this expertise that they might consider becoming involved as part of the primary school programme.